The New England Patriots back in the playoff hunt with a Monday night win over the Arizona Cardinals. A great matchup of quarterbacks with a clear win for Justin Herbert over Tua on prime time Sunday night. More Week 14 action to get into as well as Bills, Jets, AFC playoff implications coming at you right now.
NFL analyst Brian Peacock and former NFL scout Matt Williamson bring you expert NFL analysis every day in less than 30 minutes. Get an inside look into the NFL on the field and in the front office. With elite breakdowns, next-level analysis, and in-depth information only for the real NFL fans. This is Peacock and Williamson, and it starts now.
Welcome to the Peacock and Williamson NFL Show. Brian Peacock alongside Matt Williamson at BD Peacock at Williamson NFL. Thanks for making us your first listen here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Today's episode of P&W is presented by Simply Safe Home Security with Fast Protect technology exclusively from Simply Safe. 24/7 monitoring agents capture evidence to accurately verify a threat for faster police response. There's no safe like Simply Safe. Visit simplysafe.com/lockedonnfl to learn more. Starting with Monday Night Football. And I got to be honest, shout out to our colleague, Alex Clancy, the host of Locked On Cardinals. If anybody wants to hear that side of things, check out today's Locked On Cardinals episode. If you want to hear him ripping ownership, GM, coaching, even the turf, the field for the Arizona Cardinals. Like everything that could have gone wrong this year for the Cardinals has, and Alex Clancy kind of wants to fire everybody, and he's kind of been that way, and he's been fired up about it. And then on top of it, you get the injury to Kyler Murray, like just disaster season top to bottom for the Cards.
Yeah, and they're not in the hunt. We know that there could be changes. It has been a disastrous season. They're very frustrated. And Colt McCoy's a fine backup. But by just watching that on TV, the injury, and they mentioned it from the booth, Aikman or whoever, saying this might lead into next year. I mean, like, that's the worst thing you wanted to hear. I mean, at least you could, before this injury, you could have looked at things and been like, well, Kyler's going to be our quarterback for better or worse, but he's our guy. We're going to get a coach accordingly, or we're going to
hire Sean Payton and fix Kyler and fix everything, and then you're off and running with all your draft picks on the defensive side of the ball and go
right. But now it's like, well, when's he going to be back? And that's a problem. So they're in a really bad place, obviously. Huge win for the Patriots. Wasn't a real easy watch, but the second half belonged to New England. They outscored them 17-0 in the second half. Both these teams had a real hard time converting third downs. Arizona was 1 of 5 on fourth downs, lots of penalties, a defensive score by New England, but that's kind of their style. I mean, if you're going to muck it up and not make things pretty, well, that plays this team as well. And they, Ramondre Stevenson got hurt. There were a lot of injuries in this game too. I mean, it was pretty brutal, but New England's in a pretty decent spot now.
I'm not even going to be able to field a team in the playoffs of our Locked On Dynasty League. Ramondre Stevenson was my last guy to plug in there. And it's been a bad season for injuries there for Team Peacock, but still in the playoffs. And maybe I can put together a roster, and it's Dynasty, so you don't want to start dropping guys that are valuable for next year. But man, it's a war of attrition out there in the NFL sometimes, and the Cardinals are definitely failing. Do you, if you're ownership right now, you put your ownership hat on, do you say, blame it on the injuries, bad luck year, let's go get them next time with all the same pieces and retool, or do you tear that thing down?
Well, Kyler's not going anywhere. We know that, but we just don't know when we'll see him again. If it were me, I don't think they agree with me, but it sure seems like GM, coach, and quarterback are all tied at the hip together. But two of them you can get away from pretty easily and start over. Right. Yeah. And that's what I would do and give this thing a totally different vibe. I haven't liked how this team has been built since the preseason. I mean, I remember often saying things like, this team is old, little, injury prone, and they all kind of go together. And, this time of year, traditionally under Kingsbury, they have crumbled. I think some of it's because they keep bringing in these old AJ Green, Hudson type guys, Watt, or little guys, Marquise Brown, Kyler, Connor's injury prone. I mean, it's just, I don't love the way they're built.
It did get you did start to feel like it was the Belichick versus Kingsbury, and like the better coach was going to win that football game.
Yeah.
Like, that was kind of the vibe of the whole thing for the Patriots, who, by the way, and again for the Pats, very good at beating those bad teams. Haven't been good beating the good teams, but it's good enough right now to get them at 7-6. And currently, if the season ended today, we know it does not. But if it did, it would be the New England Patriots who would have the 7th seed of that wild card in the AFC. And I'll go through the tiebreakers here real quick. We don't have to get too deep into the weeds on the tiebreakers.
Real quick before you do, I want to say one thing because you mentioned it. They lose to the good teams, they beat the bad teams, and this is the list of quarterbacks that the Patriots have defeated this year: Trubisky, Goff before he started to get going in New England. We know he's a lot different outdoors. Brissett, who Belichick drafted, Zach Wilson twice, Ellinger, and now McCoy. And you lose to Buffalo, the Vikings, the Bears, Packers, Ravens, Dolphins. Like it's pretty clear that they beat the teams they should and they lose the teams they shouldn't, more or less.
The New England Patriots would win the tiebreaker over the Los Angeles Chargers, who are also 7-6. More on that game in a minute from Sunday, based on the best win percentage in conference games. Division tiebreak was initially used to eliminate the New York Jets. New England wins the tiebreaker over the Jets based on head-to-head win percentage because they, as you just mentioned, beat Zach Wilson twice there. So Jets went to Mike White a little bit too late on this season to have that tiebreaker over the Patriots. So right now, even though the Pats, the Chargers, and the Jets are all 7-6, it would be the Chargers and Jets out, the Patriots in, but still have a few games to play to decide this thing in the AFC and see what that ends up
They're
looking
tough ones too.
Right. Absolutely.
I just pulled them up at Vegas, Cincy at home, Miami at home, at Buffalo. And I bet you're hoping the Bills are resting starters, but that doesn't sound likely. I don't like where New England's at all of a sudden. I didn't realize how hard their 4 games are.
Miami's stumbling a little bit right now.
They are.
Tua hasn't looked like the same guy the last 2 weeks. You kind of give him a pass. Okay, was it a tough Niners defense that made him look bad? And then Brandon Staley came with a really good defensive plan against Tua, and Herbert's throwing for 369 yards, was it, against the 367 yards, 39 of 51 against the Dolphins on Sunday night, 23-17 win for the Chargers over the Dolphins. Dalton's still 8-5. And have that 5 seed right now in the AFC. But again, that's a game away. So a lot of things very close right now with that wild card in the AFC, and a clear win for Justin Herbert, who people this season started to say, hey, maybe it was Tua that was the better quarterback all along.
Yeah, I mean, I'm considered a bit of a Tua hater. I think I'm more of a Tua doubter every step of the way. He's had a tremendous season, but I'll be honest, I've scoffed at the notion that he's nearly the player Justin Herbert is. I mean, what Herbert has dealt with this year is remarkable. This is like one of the only games he's had Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. He still was under duress like every snap. He got sacked 4 times and could have got sacked 7. I mean, he played with broken ribs or whatever that injury was for much of the year. I mean, he's a tremendous player. And that conversation to me isn't close, but it isn't a knock on Tua as much as there's maybe 3 quarterbacks in the league I'd take over Herbert. I mean, Tua is just not in that class. He's not an elite player where I think Herbert is. We mentioned schedule a little bit. Things have not gone well for Miami since your Niners beat up on them. And it's somewhat of a blueprint. And now, the Dolphins have to go to Buffalo next week too. I have my doubts about how well this team travels in weather. Can they run the ball? Are they built that way? They're a Florida team. But what you're seeing, and your Niners, I think, started this, is a lot of the corners are banging around Hill and Waddle quite a bit. It's such a timing-based passing attack. And they're lining up with outside leverage to push those guys in the middle of the field, where they've done great damage this year. But they're putting so many bodies defensively in that neighborhood, especially if you have a Fred Warner, of course, that it gets really muddy really quick, and the timing routes are getting knocked off a little bit, and the offense has been disrupted. And they don't have a running game to lean on.
I saw a former Locked On host, Ben Solak, do a breakdown this morning of some X's and O's there, and it was interesting watching what Brandon Staley's Chargers defense did with Tyreek Hill in motion, because they don't want him to get jammed at the line, so he's in motion a lot. I think he's in motion more than any wide receiver in the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. And instead of traveling in man coverage with Tua with the outside corner, what they did is they left the outside corner on the original side, and they let the slot corner run with him
Oh, okay.
because he was going to become a slot receiver. So if he was going to stay outside, they're going to cover him with an outside receiver. If they put him in motion, they actually followed him with the slot guy instead to the opposite side of the field, and then playing the leverage game and trying to take away those inside throws and make Tua make the more difficult outside the numbers throws and the whole shot throws, which Tua is not as good at doing because the clear talent difference there between Tua and Herbert. And so, it was a nice little plan for Brandon Staley. So, look, for those guys that wanted Brandon Staley fired, did a good job in this game for sure.
Yeah, and now a rookie head coach and a young quarterback are going to have to counterpunch. I mean that's the key here. I mean, coaching is huge late in the year. Everyone's going to do this to you until you can do it. Until you can prove otherwise. And what's the counterpunch? We shall see. But now you're in Buffalo.
All right, we'll take a look at the rest of the AFC playoff picture here, including how the Dolphins, Pats, Chargers, Jets all stack up there with the Bengals in that picture for the wild card, how secure those division leaders are with the Bills, Chiefs, Ravens, and Titans, and who might be able to jump into any of those groups next. BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting information, stats, news, analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there, from pro football to college bowl season to basketball, World Cup. They've got it all covered at betonline.net. If you love sports podcasts as well, you can find those at BetOnline. You can find tons of season-long odds, and interesting how some of those things have changed now into the 14th week of the season for Super Bowl favorites, betting favorites, next coach to be fired favorites or unfavorites. In that case, always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting information, and you make sure to get informed before you make your bets at BetOnline. Get over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more at BetOnline, where the game starts. Thanks again, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen today. For your second listen today, check out Locked On Sports Today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. In fact, Matt and I do make an appearance on today's edition, the Tuesday edition of Locked On Sports Today, available on this app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. The Bills and the Jets. Let's go check that one out. And it was a 20-12 win for those Buffalo Bills over the Jets. The Jets fall to 7-6 on the season, as we mentioned before, and in a three-way tie right now in a battle for that last wild card spot. The Buffalo Bills now improving to 10-3 on the season.
Yeah, weather was a big factor here. Mike White took an absolute beating. I don't know how much people saw that, but I mean, he gained some respect for me in terms of toughness. Looks like Zonovan Knight is now the running back to own in fantasy in this Jets backfield. I see some of these young guys step up late in the year. But one trend I think we're seeing that's a little worrisome in terms of playoff caliber teams with White as a quarterback is a lot of yardage, not a lot of touchdowns. I mean, and you see that across the league with younger quarterbacks, that when the field gets tight, it gets a little tougher for these guys. And, he doesn't have the biggest arm to drive it in there and, not as much experience. But I have some doubts about the Bills, too. I mean, this was a great Bills pass rush and defensive play. Ed Oliver really stood out to me as just a star in the making. But I feel like this Bills offense is missing one thing. And we were talking about on Locked On Dynasty yesterday that wouldn't shock me if their first round pick is a wide receiver. Like they're kind of looking for a slot. They've been looking for a playmaker out of the backfield. I think Gabe Davis isn't as good as people think. And it feels like it's Allen, Diggs, and what's next, in terms of the great teams.
I could see that absolutely. Continuing to, Von Miller might not be long for his NFL career now. Maybe you're trying to replace him with a younger guy. They've spent a lot of resources on the defensive line, but a lot of bigger guys and not so much the juice. But yeah, something a dynamic athlete on either side of the ball is probably where the Bills will go less beef, if I had to guess. But still a very good football team. Mike White was hit a lot in that game with some snow coming down. And interesting that Zonovan Knight has become the guy there. They traded for James Robinson and have kind of just
nobody seems to like him.
Yeah.
3 coaching staffs now haven't liked him, 2 in Jacksonville.
So that's and maybe just he's not sort of athletic enough, dynamic enough for what they want to do, that outside zone running game, and Knight maybe gives them a little bit more of that than Robinson does. But Yeah, the Jets are a tough one because Mike White's done a nice job, but I just still think the Jets are going to be missing something, and they might end up on the outside looking in here, and then knowing that they're losing some of these tiebreakers too is going to be
Yeah.
really rough for them to get in the AFC. And I
You
mentioned
mentioned they
before,
lost twice to New England.
yeah, lost
You know,
twice to New
yeah.
England, so they're going to lose that tiebreaker. The Chargers right now would win the tiebreaker over the Jets based on best win percentage in those conference games. So
Okay.
those games are really important. Those AFC games the rest of the way.
Yeah, especially because you're not going to be in the hunt for the division. You're just fighting for wild cards. And this is still a very successful Jet season. I didn't see 7-6 coming and doing battle with the Buffaloes and teams like that. Quarterbacks obviously going to be the offseason discussion, but they can still get in the playoffs. And it's been a positive year overall for sure.
I want to talk about the playoff teams first and finish that before we talk about the teams who are right now not in the playoffs, but might be able to make a push there. And one young quarterback in Trevor Lawrence that is really,
Ooh, yeah.
really coming on now in his second year in the NFL. But the Baltimore Ravens at 9-4 and the Cincinnati Bengals at 9-4, top of the AFC North. And the Ravens right now do win the tiebreaker over Cincinnati based on head-to-head. Did they beat them twice already? Has that happened twice?
That I'm double checking as we speak here. They played the last game of the year.
Okay. Oh, so that's going to be
So
huge.
that could be huge.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Week 18, Bengals, Ravens. Okay. There's a good one because right now, if the Ravens were to win that, obviously that would give them a win and also give them the season series over the Bengals, which would solidify that tiebreaker against the Ravens. And then after, obviously, the head-to-head, then it goes division, then it goes conference tiebreakers for those two teams.
Baltimore is a much easier schedule before that Week 18 game, but I think Cincy's the much better team.
The Cincinnati Bengals are just playing so hot right
Oh.
now, and unfortunately for the Browns, they ran into the Bengals in this one, 23-10 Sunday. The Bengals beat the Browns, and Watson just looks so rusty still. Like this might be a next year thing for Deshaun Watson. Like maybe we underestimated how much time he's had off, and I can't really think of a time that a quarterback had that much time off and was asked to come back, and not even come back to start a season and get some preseason and kind of roll into it slowly. He's asked to come in December and play NFL football, and it's just not quite happening yet for Deshaun Watson. Even though you see some signs, a couple throws, you're like, okay, there's kind of that guy, but this might be a next year thing for Deshaun Watson and the Browns.
Yeah, I mean, especially at 5-8 now. I mean, the Steelers, Browns, and Raiders were all 5-7 coming into this week, and all three lost, which basically kind of wipes them off the map in a tough conference. I think you have to look at this thing like we want to see a step forward every week from Watson and build some momentum for next year. Guys like Donovan Peoples-Jones and Njoku look like those are keepers, and David Bell's playing a little better. So, you can see the optimism, but their bread and butter, the run game. I mean, Nick Chubb, 14 carries for 34 yards. I mean, against a really good D, but I mean, to me, that's the biggest reason you lost was Watson's inefficiency and no running game to lean on. But the Bengals are as well-rounded as any team in the league.
The Ravens just squeaking by your Steelers, Matt, 16-14. They've got injury problems at quarterback, and they actually went to their third-string quarterback. Didn't look as good as Brock Purdy and the Niners when they got to their third-string quarterback, but still were able to win this game 16-14, which, like you said, probably pretty much knocks the Steelers out, even though I personally didn't think the Steelers were going to be in it in the end. They at least had a shot mathematically. It's rough now.
Absolutely. And I mean, I could talk for hours about this game, but the nuts and bolts of it are, as you mentioned, we saw 4 quarterbacks in this game and Lamar didn't even start it. So Pickett got knocked out early on a brutal hit. Huntley got knocked out late with a brutal hit. And the nuts and bolts of it are Trubisky threw 3 interceptions in a 2-point game, and all of them were in field goal range and probably would have resulted in some kind of points. Calais Campbell blocked a field goal that probably would have resulted in some kind of points. But a lot of Steeler fans have said, optimistic ones are like, man, if just one of those 4 things don't happen, they win this game by 1 point. Yeah, maybe, but I thought Baltimore was the better team. I mean, Baltimore ran all over the Steelers. I mean, and they didn't even hide it. They were whoever wins this game every time they play is just whoever's more physical, and it was the Ravens, and these coaches know each other so well. I mean, just a nugget too. Like the Steelers played like half of their snaps with only one corner on the field. I mean, just had no respect at all for the Ravens passing game, which I think is going to haunt the Ravens when they play playoff type teams. I mean, their passing game's a disaster, even with Lamar, and everyone's just focusing on Andrews, and they still couldn't stop the run, even with that bigger personnel.
That's what I was going to say. It's still the Steelers
Right.
didn't do a great job stopping the run, which has peaked its head a couple times with the Steelers, which might be on the off-season to-do list for Pittsburgh. No,
there's been a couple games that have been bad. Last week against Atlanta, this one was the worst, and then next week they play Carolina, who's running the ball really well too. You see them just hand it off every play.
Carolina fighting for maybe a
They're
little
not bad.
something there with those NFC playoffs, or and basically they're probably not going to make it to the wild card, but that NFC South. What's going on with the South? So let's talk about the Titans and Jaguars next, and the arrival of Trevor Lawrence. Roll out the red carpet. He has arrived, and the Chiefs Broncos as well next. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You want to say, hey, tonight or this week, I'm going to take Patrick Mahomes to throw for more than 300 yards. Well, you can find those types of games at Prize Picks. Prize Picks is you versus the projections available. You're not building an entire roster. You're not playing against other people. You are competing against the projections available at Prize Picks. You pick 2 to 5 players. If they score more or less than their Prize Picks projection, you can win up to 10 times your money on that entry. Prize Picks offers projections on any sport that you watch as well. Tons of NFL projections, NBA, soccer, PGA, college sports, NASCAR, tennis, MMA, boxing, you name it, even cricket and disc golf and esports. You can find it at Prize Picks. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less, safe and fast withdrawals, and it's currently operational in over 30 states and Canada. So download the Prize Picks app or go to prizepicks.com to sign up and play daily fantasy sports. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with promo code Locked On. If you deposit $100, Prize Picks will give you $100. If you deposit $50, Prize Picks will give you $50 more to play with. Don't forget to enter promo code Locked On at sign up for an instant deposit match up to $100. Trevor Lawrence. I got a stat for you here.
Wow.
Trevor Lawrence, again, so this is 2 out of 3 weeks where he's gone big. He was 30 of 42 passing, 368 yards in this one, 3 touchdowns in this. Jaguars 36-22 win over the Titans, and this is a Titans D that has been very stingy. The Jaguars went in there and put 36 points up on them in their house. The Titans still at first place in the AFC South, but this from Mike Renner of Pro Football Focus. Going back to, and this is, I thought it was going to be a stat going back to a couple weeks ago, like say last 3 weeks, Trevor Lawrence. No, according to Mike Renner, after the surgical game yesterday Sunday from Trevor Lawrence, Lawrence is now second highest graded quarterback, according to Pro Football Focus, since week 9. So going back 5 weeks now, all the way to week 9, second highest grade quarterback in the NFL is Trevor Lawrence. Has Trevor Lawrence officially arrived, Matt?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, I've been a believer every step of the way. People were really hard on him. He absolutely looks like he belongs. We've seen the stats, great, but the film is better. And I wanted to say that about Herbert as well on that Sunday night or Monday night, whatever night game that was. Sure, the stats are wonderful. They're happy whether you're on your fantasy team, but they look better and they're making those around them better, even when things are not going great with the offense. I mean, he just elevated Evan Ingram to no degree. And, I all I can think about is what about when Ridley gets there? I mean, like now we're really cooking. I mean, that could be a great combination, and they're certainly building something. I have my doubts about Tennessee, though. I mean, much like the Patriot conversation, their wins have come against Vegas, Indy, Washington, Indy again, Houston, Denver, Green Bay. They lose to teams like Cincy and Philly and Kansas City. Like, they beat the crap teams and they lose to the real good teams. And I think they're sort of a fraud that way. I mean, they're just not a very talented team.
So essentially they are the New England Patriots South.
Yeah.
Same exact record.
Yep. Good point.
Yeah.
Beating like the same teams, basically.
Yeah.
Right.
Interesting. And, a little lack of firepower on offense.
Not explosive.
Defense,
well-coached.
Well-coached defense. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Not a contender is the bottom line.
Yeah. Well, they're a contender because they're going to be in the tournament.
Right.
Because, I mean, the Jacksonville Jaguars still 2 full games behind them but they would have the tiebreaker. Could they catch him?
I don't know about that. That seems unlikely to me. The question for me with the Jags is, could I write a story that you would believe where they're one of the top 3 teams in the AFC next year?
They're the AFC Lions, basically.
Yeah, there you go. I mean, but I'll trust Lawrence more than what the Lions have. That's not a knock on what the Lions have. I think the Lions are a really exciting team for next year. But
I like the Lions' weapons. I like the Jags quarterback.
Yeah.
But Goff is kind of resurrecting himself a
He's
little
playing
bit
great.
too. Yeah.
I mean, Lions have an O-line. I wonder if Jacksonville quickly becomes a team that free agents now want to go to. I mean, it's a wonderful city. It's South, all that stuff. But they've always kind of been like my Pittsburgh Pirates, where I'm not playing there. If I'm a free agent, I can go anywhere else. I'm not.
That's why you have to overpay and have this contract that's all dolled up and looks like it's crazy money, even though it's kind of not going to probably get there. But the Christian Kirk contract, you have to overpay to get someone to go there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you don't have to now.
Yeah, I mean, I would be very excited to go there. I think they have a coach, they have a quarterback, they're building a culture, and it's a pretty attractive landing spot.
Some pieces on defense as well. Yep, 100%. If I told you, if I came back from the future, Matt, and said, "Hey, guess what? The Jacksonville Jaguars made the playoffs
this year.
Right now, this year, they're 5-8. They're 2 games behind the Jets, the Chargers, the Patriots for wild card spots, and the Titans for the AFC South. Which of those teams did they jump over? Is it even possible? Could you write the story?
Pulling up the schedule, they're hosting Dallas this week. They go to the Jets. They go to Houston, and then they play Tennessee in the last game of the season, which, much like Ravens-Bengals, conceivably could decide the division. It's great that they get Tennessee again, because Tennessee goes to the Chargers. They play Houston. They also play Dallas, and then they go to Jacksonville. So I kind of feel like would the Jags have to sweep that 4, and Tennessee has to lose 1 or 2?
Yeah. Basically, Tennessee could win 2 games, and as long as Jacksonville sweeps it, they would still get in because they'd have the tiebreak over the Titans at 9-8.
Okay.
If the Jacksonville Jaguars lose 1 and they end up 8-9 on the season, then that would mean Tennessee would have to go 1-3.
Okay.
And still lose to Jaguars in the last week. So
I mean, I'm probably wrong. I'm probably wrong about this prediction, but I bet the Titans only have 1 more win when they play the Jags in week 18. And I'm betting the Jags have 2 more wins by then. Those teams losing.
That means that they could be playing for
absolutely could. Yeah. And then they would have the head-to-head if they beat them twice.
Woo! There we go.
That could be fun. Yeah. I definitely can sell. You can sell me that, fairy tale, no doubt.
And looking at the rest of it, it's unlikely that they're able to leapfrog all the other wild card teams. So it's kind of AFC South or nothing for the Jaguars.
Yeah,
it's maybe I thought I was going to say, it's probably unlikely when I brought it up, but actually
it might be likely.
Maybe it is somewhat possible. That'd be something with the way Trevor Lawrence is playing right now.
Yeah, I think they're better than Tennessee. If we're power ranking them right now, I think I'd put them over Tennessee because of the offensive firepower,
Real quick, just a sad state of affairs for the Denver Broncos. And, they kind of were running into a Chiefs team that everyone expected them to lose this game. Broncos fall to 3-10 on the year after a 34-28 loss to the visiting Kansas City Chiefs. Chiefs are now 10-3. I don't even know what else to say about this game except for this was a good team against a bad team.
Yeah, and to be honest, Denver hung around much more than I expected. Mahomes threw 3 picks. Wilson was better than he had been. 3 touchdowns, 247. And then he took that awful, awful hit down by the goal line, had the big egg on his head, and obviously looked concussed. I don't know what his status is. But just when things were starting to look sort of okay for Denver, then something bad happens. It's just not their year. And Jerry Jeudy exploded.
You're seeing frustration from the players.
Yeah.
Bad situation that they got to rectify, and they got to go to the top to probably do that.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, everybody, for making Peacock and Williamson your first listen. Get your questions in for tomorrow's mailbag episode right here, Peacock and Williamson.